So Marcus Rashford recently did a podcast with Gary Lineker and Micah Richards, in which he speaks about his move to Barcelona and the prospects of that, as well as reflecting on his time in Manchester United. And on YouTube, the response was fantastic. People really loved seeing Marcus in this light, seeing him comfortable, talking in depth about things, and were also praising Gary Lineker and Micah Richards for the way that they conducted the entire episode. But then when you go on other forms of social media, your Instagrams, your X's, which is Twitter, TikTok, even YouTube Shorts, the reaction to this interview is completely different. People were just in the comments talking about, oh, he's so entitled, he was earning 300,000 a week and he's complaining about the managers and he's complaining about Manchester United and this, that, and the other, but he wasn't putting the effort in, he wasn't turning up to training, he wasn't, just all these different things. And I find it so interesting how one piece of media can be interpreted, responded to completely differently and received completely differently on one platform compared to the other. And I think it shows a wider thing that is going on in football, which is that the medium through which you consume content, sports content, football content, can sometimes dictate completely your opinion on what you're seeing. And I'm going to start by talking about this Marcus Rashford example, but it bleeds into the general everyday coverage of sports and football in particular that we see. So how can that happen? Like, what is the difference if two people are being presented the same media on two different platforms? Surely the responses should not be completely contradictory of each other. But that's because if someone goes to watch a YouTube video, a 40-minute podcast of Marcus Rashford, they number one have chosen to see it. So on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, even on YouTube Shorts, if you're in the feed, you're not choosing what you're watching. The algorithm is choosing it for you. And they're not choosing it because they think you love Marcus Rashford or are a fan of him. They're choosing it because they know that you care about him in one way or another, whether you hate him or love him, and whether or not you're in the mood to consume the content from the podcast. And also, it's only a short clip, which is often taken out of context or just doesn't have the full context provided to it that the full-length version has. For example, when he's speaking about managers, he's speaking about Manchester United's managers, and it's basically saying that because they were changing so frequently, they were not able to take the steps needed towards winning a Premier League. If you look at the recent winners of the Premier League this decade, for example, Manchester City and Liverpool, they did not, like, Guardiola did not win in year one. He built something. Klopp did not win in year one. They built something. Like, if they weren't given that time to build, then they wouldn't have got to the point where they were successful. So successful to the point where, because Klopp had established Liverpool's identity so much, Slot could come in with the same players and continue the legacy that Klopp left. Hence why they won in that season. Manchester United, on the other hand, have been, ever since Fergie left, chopping and changing their managers left, right, and centre. So they weren't able to build towards winning in the same way that Manchester City and Liverpool did. But because they, in Marcus's words, had, good managers and good players, they were able to win cups, a Europa League, an FA Cup. They could do that because those are like one-off games that you win or lose. But when it comes to actually building towards winning a Premier League, you can't do that based on one-off games. It's 38 games and you have to be the most consistent team throughout. So he was basically articulating that point, and the responses on short form media just weren't understanding, I don't know whether it was intentionally or unintentionally, what he was saying. They were just saying, oh, but how is the player blaming the manager when the player wasn't turning up to training or the player wasn't training hard or all these different kind of things? He's on 300k a week and yet he's blaming the managers. But anyone with even 3 brain cells can understand that he was not blaming the managers for the failure of the club over the last 10-15 years. He was simply highlighting the impact that the instability in the club has had on its success. And I'm sure a lot of people understand that. I mean, when you go to the comments of the YouTube video, it's full of people that understand and appreciate getting that perspective from him. But on short form media, you're incentivized to have an inflammatory opinion on something like X. If you go viral saying, oh, but Marcus Rashford didn't work hard or whatever, you can get 10 million impressions on that opinion, which directly gives you money. The same with these other platforms, whether it's you making content about it or you making comments under the video, you can get likes, views, money just from saying something that is like quite simple and painting Marcus Rashford as either a good guy or a bad guy. So there's no real nuance in understanding, because the media that you're consuming is already being framed to you. It's being presented as, you know, Marcus Rashford is good or Marcus Rashford is bad. And that's now what the discourse is. It's not about what he's actually saying. It's about, does he have a right, as someone that's earning so much money and that, you know, quit on the club in the eyes of some people, does he have a right to have that opinion? We're not even discussing the ins and outs, because if someone said a tweet articulating what he was saying, like someone, not a footballer, not even a pundit, but just a regular person said a tweet articulating what he was saying, or made a YouTube video, or made a TikTok saying this is why Manchester United have not been successful over the last 12 years, it probably would have been understood more and respected more than someone like Marcus Rashford, who actually has experience inside of the situation, which is just crazy to me. Like, whenever we hear players or ex-players expressing their opinions on football, there's always a response, a large number of responses saying, well, how can this player say this when they haven't achieved that? Or how can this ex-player criticize this player when they haven't done what they've done in football, or whatever it may be? Who are they? Who is, I don't know, Jamie O'Hara to speak on Phil Foden's career or bad season or whatever, when Jamie O'Hara was never as good as Phil Foden, for example, right? And I hear parts of it because some players in the media are overly critical of other players, despite understanding that it's so much easier said than done when it comes to achieving things in football. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a right to having an opinion on something. Because if it was the case that your footballing ability correlated with how much you're allowed to say on footballers or football, then you and I wouldn't even be able to be having this conversation right now, because neither of us, to my knowledge, are professional footballers. If you are, hello, welcome. But by that same logic, you can't say, well, pundits don't have a right to speak about this because they were never as good at football, when you and I weren't as good at football as them. So how can we even criticize what they're saying about football? And the same applies for players. Why can Marcus Rashford make a eloquent, articulate point about Manchester United, his experience there, and what's gone on there, as someone that's literally lived through it? Why is it wrong for him to say something like that because you don't like him or the way it was presented to you that he conducted himself in his last years? But you, who had no experience of it other than from an outside perspective, you're allowed to say whatever you want about it. You don't have to agree with him. Like, you can disagree with his point, but just invalidating it entirely because it's him just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't add up. It contradicts the whole logic in itself. And this generation of footballers are often criticized for how detached they are from society and reality and all those things. But I feel like football fans need to take more accountability, because they have breeded such a toxic environment on social media that, like, why would anyone engage? Why would they not detach from that? Like, if someone like Rashford, who has such an active impact in the community, I don't need to get into all of that, but he has such an active impact in the community, and he's doing shows like this where he's actually having a long conversation, giving insight into the ins and outs of being a footballer and playing in a football club, and that's not being well received or appreciated. Like, I wouldn't blame him for just be like, you know what, forget these guys. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to engage. I'm gonna have someone else manage my social media, because there's no value in engaging in such a toxic environment. I don't view this as like a society problem. Like, I feel like a lot of people are capable of comprehending what he's saying, understanding what he's saying, and even if whether they agree, disagree, like, not just being so inflammatory about it. But as I said, on one platform, you're rewarded, or on one genre of platform, you're rewarded for being inflammatory. On the other one, you choose to engage with the content when you want to engage with it, if you want to engage with it. And that's why you see a community, a response that is just a lot more mature about how they're processing what he's saying. But unfortunately, that is a minority, because the majority of people are consuming social media short form content every day, and it's completely shifting the way that they view sport. And it's one of the reasons why I deleted social media from my phone entirely. Like, I only use it now because I'm a content creator, so I post on there occasionally. But as a consumer, I dislike it, which is one of many reasons. I dislike it, and I feel like since deleting it the last 2 months, the way that I've consumed sport has just been in a lot more of a healthy way, and a way that's independent to my own way of thinking. An example of this is in the Women's Euros, in which I watched it from my own perspective. Yes, it would have been influenced by conversations with my family, my friends, what was being posted on traditional media, but those were choices that I made. And as a result, the content that I made out of that, as a content creator, the content that I made out of that tournament was amongst my favorite that I've ever made, because I was able to make a video about Michelle Adjuban from my own perspective, and it resonated really well with a lot of people. And the same thing with Chloe Kelly. But I can tell you right now, if I was on social media consuming what other people were consuming about these athletes, maybe it wouldn't have been as unique, as original, as creative of an idea, if it even occurred at all. Because unbeknownst to me, whilst I'm viewing the Euros and Chloe Kelly's journey from my own lens, which I then created a 16-minute documentary on YouTube, there was an entire narrative running rampant on social media about Chloe Kelly, about how she's cringe, how she's aura farming, she's not that good. I don't know, because I wasn't there, but this is from what people that were consuming that content were telling me. If I was consuming every 5 scrolls on TikTok clips of Chloe Kelly aura farming and not being cold, bro, and whatever it is that people were saying on the socials, yeah, maybe that would have like shifted or altered my perspective of how I was watching the Euros and how I've seen her journey over the years, particularly this season, and how it culminated how it did in the Euros final. Maybe the discourse that I'd be bringing online would either be, oh yeah, Chloe Kelly's cringe, Chloe Kelly's this, or Chloe Kelly's not cringe, or she is good, or whatever. But that's not the conversation I'm trying to have. But when you're so like deeply, like chronically online in the socials, you just end up engaging in conversations, not in your will, about things that you don't want to talk about or don't really care about. And it genuinely changes the lens through which you watch and consume sport. And I do think this is a social media problem, not a society problem, because on YouTube, I post a video, as I said, people choose to engage with the video of all different demographics, age, gender, um, race, nationality. Like, YouTube not only knows what you like, but gives you the option to choose to watch it. So all the response was so positive, so understanding, like people that really valued the creative perspective that I brought to Chloe Kelly's story, which I'm very thankful, by the way, for all the responses to that video. And they could also relate, as they also admired her story and were so happy that someone else had presented it in the way that I did. But on TikTok, not only did it barely get any views, I don't even know the comment, because there was like one comment and one response to it. I didn't see, because I'm not on the app, I only re-downloaded it to post on it. I didn't see the original comment, but I saw the response was something like, nah, it's not this. Like, if he made a video about Ronaldo, you wouldn't be saying that, or something like that. So I can only assume the original comment was like gender related, like, oh, man said he made a documentary about Chloe Kelly. I don't know what it was, but the fact that that was the only response on an app like TikTok, and the same video on YouTube got a completely different response from a completely different demographic, just shows the influence that social media has on football discourse. And it gets dangerous because it's damaging and altering people's legacies. We now feel like we're in an era of football where everyone's just talking about how bad it is, how much it's fallen off, Players aren't as creative as they used to be, as expressive, as accessible, or relatable, or don't have as much aura, whatever you want to say. But that's not because players have changed. That's because the way that we talk about players on social media has changed. I'm telling you, if someone like Mbappe was doing the things that he was doing, had the numbers that he had 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, we'd be talking about him like one of the greatest players ever. Ever. But now he's a flop, he's a failure, he's overrated, he's not actually that good, he's a speed merchant. All these just nonsense narratives that is intentionally there to evoke emotion one way or another. But on the flip side, if you brought someone like Zlatan to this generation, Zlatan Ibrahimovic is considered a legend of the game. He is, like, people speak about him like he's God. Because he speaks about himself like he's God. But if he was doing all of that stuff, talking in third person about himself, about how great he is, and all these different kind of things, not only would people say, oh, that's cringe, bro thinks he's this and whatever, but they'd completely invalidate everything he did on the pitch, because it's like, well, you never won a Ballon d'Or. Would he have won a Ballon d'Or in this era? Potentially. But no, actually, because he didn't win a Champions League or a World Cup, which are the two things that it seems like players have to have these days to win a Ballon d'Or. So people would invalidate his entire career because he either hasn't had certain team achievements or an individual achievement, which you can only get with those team achievements. He would not be viewed in the same way. All those legends from the past would not be spoken about in the same way that they are now if they were playing in this era. Your Zlatans, your Drogba's, they have a field day these days when talking about Drogba's stats and stuff like that. If he was dropping I don't know, 8-goal seasons in this day and age and was being put in, GOAT Premier League striker conversations, it just wouldn't happen. Same with Henry. Yes, he, never won a Ballon d'Or. He never won a European trophy with Arsenal and those kind of things. But people can acknowledge those shortcomings, but still acknowledge how good he was as a player. Whereas these days, because of the way the discourse is online, people just view it black and white. Either you've achieved this or you haven't, and they don't actually care about the style of play that you have, your passion for the game and all those things. They just make things wins and losses, trophies or no trophies. So if people don't care about all those intricate things about football, the creativity, style of play, entertainment, all of that, why should the players? So how are we going to get onto the players now that they don't have that same love for the game or whatever when we don't have it? Why should they? But as I said, this is all from my perspective, and I'm aware that a lot of people have grown up in different eras of football, of social media, and just have different worldview to what I do, which is why I'd love to hear in the comments what your perspective is on all of this. Am I tweaking? Am I overreacting? Am I making stuff up? Or is what some of I'm saying actually resonating with you? I really want to know different people's perspectives on this so I can get a more well-rounded understanding on what is actually going on when it comes to football discourse on social media and just in the world in general. So make sure to comment and subscribe if you want more of this kind of content. Honestly, there's so much more that I could speak about. And if you use any of those apps that I don't consume but I create on, then you can follow me at Luke Oko on TikTok, at Luke Oko TV on Instagram, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching Oko TV. It's been real.